Now I get to ask some questions. The first question goes to the Minister for Ageing, Justine Elliott. The Productivity Commission is working on a number of issues around aged care, including developing a fair and proper system for indexing aged care funding. In the meantime, both the Coalition and the Greens have promised to restore the 1.75% supplementary funding known as the CAP, or Conditional Adjustment Payment. Your government froze the CAP in the 2009 budget, so will Labor match the other parties and restore that additional 1.75%?
Well, look, Peter, if I could just start by saying in relation to the CAP, as I said earlier, we've committed to that within the forward estimates that's in there, and I want to be very clear in relation to that. As I also said, we've increased aged care funding by about 30% since we've been in government. I think that has to be acknowledged in terms of the funding going to aged care providers to be providing that care. But when we're talking about increases in funding as well, as I mentioned earlier, let's have a look also at the historic pension reforms that the Labor government brought in, and we ensured that that flowed very fairly between aged care providers and care recipients as well, and delivering over $700 million to the sector. So we actually have a record of increasing funding and delivering that. And on top of that, we have a commitment to the Productivity Commission inquiry, as you said, to be looking at that issue and many other issues around it for the long term as well.
But in the interim, you won't match that restoration of the 1.75%?
Well, what I've said, Peter, is we stand on our record of actually increasing the funding since we've been in government. There was an underinvestment, and we have, through a whole series of measures, increased that. And we acknowledge for the long term it's one of the many issues we need to be looking at through the Productivity Commission inquiry.
Glenn Rees, Alzheimer's Australia, thank you very much for your presentations. My simple question is, will all three parties this morning commit to aged care reform in the 2011 budget over a period of years and to combat the dementia epidemic? We know what to do. Can we do it, please?
Glenn, we've made it very clear that aged care reform is a second-term agenda for the Gillard Labor government. We've made that extremely clear. The Prime Minister has said that, the Health Minister has said that, I've said it on many occasions as well, because we recognise all the many challenges ahead. And of course, as you have raised very well on many occasions, the growing number of people with dementia as well. We have that commitment to the Dementia Initiative also, and we do understand the challenges associated with the growing numbers with dementia and what a major part it plays when we're looking at the entire aged care sector. But we are very serious about aged care reform and very serious about building a system for the future.
Can I just say, of course, it was the Coalition that made dementia a priority, and certainly in our policy we've certainly added to that, and we've injected some additional funds of $50 million into that dementia program, and to also recognising other neurological degenerative conditions. Can I just say that yes, we are committed to reform. Indeed, I have been very critical of this government because we need, and the sector has been crying out for reform. One provider in Tasmania told me that he had made submissions to 17 different reviews and inquiries since 2007. Yes, I see people smiling in the front here. That's the reality. We've had reviews upon reviews upon reviews, and now this government has shunted off aged care to yet another review with the Productivity Commission. Now, we accept that, we will inherit that, and we will also, as Tony Abbott said, respect the findings of that of the Productivity Commission. But unlike what the government is doing, we want to actually, and we have set out a framework in our policy for taking that and those recommendations as part of an overall framework of entering into an agreement with the sector. Reform is good, but it must be reform that this sector can take, and we want to be in partnership with you. We do not want you to beg this government. We don't want you to beg the government. We want to be in partnership with you to formulate the necessary reforms and set out a framework over 4 years and into the future in relation to aged care. We see that as important. We see that the importance of empowering you as the sector to work in partnership with us to make the necessary reforms. Not let's wait into the future, but now, because our agreement will be signed within a year. We need reform now.
And in terms of the Greens, our vision is very clearly for the long term, both short term and the long term. If we, as I said earlier, if we don't start acting now, we're not going to have the reforms in place that we need for the future. So we're committed to the long term. We also need to get away from the 3-year funding cycles, because that's also a problem, is you're continually making just 3-year because of the election cycle. We need to get beyond that. I'm very hopeful that the Greens will be in balance of power, and we will use that responsibly in terms of addressing aged care issues and keep aged care very firmly on the agenda, with our big picture vision for aged care both now and into the future very clearly front and centre.
Ian Yates, Coda Australia, Council on the Ageing, speaking on behalf of the Aged Consumer Network throughout Australia. We speak to many, many thousands of care recipients and families each year, and what they tell us is that they want more care, more quality care, but they want more control, and they want more choice, and that they want more community care, and they want it to be a robust, well-funded system. I mean, people in their homes and in community settings, what we call HAC program and packages, which should be, as the Greens have said, put into a single integrated community care program. My question is, while the Productivity Commission is really important, it's really the last chance to get this right, we don't need the Productivity Commission for you to give a commitment that will be more community care, more consumer control and choice, and more sustainability. A specific question to the Shadow Minister: if you were in power and have the new agreements, will consumer organisations be a party to those agreements?
Thank you. And certainly in our policy we have committed to an appropriate balance between residential and community. We know that there is a growing need and a growing request for community care, and that certainly will be a fundamental part of our agreement. We have also indicated streamlining of existing community packages. We know that the package system isn't working, and we see the agreement as an opportunity for the sector to look at better ways that can be done. And certainly the aged care sector, the recipients of care are consumers, Ian, and so as such it is important that the cross-section of stakeholders, and we have said as part of our agreement it is vital that the broad spectrum of stakeholders in aged care and the wide spectrum of it will have a part and a voice in the process that we have identified.
There is one question I need to ask, and that is what I might call the capital question. So one of the big issues in aged care is capital. Where to get the capital to build the new facilities that we need as Australia ages, as opposed to the ongoing funding and staffing issues. In low care residential facilities, residents help provide that capital themselves through a bond, often money they get from the sale of their own home. The question is, where does the money come from? Where does the capital come from to build those high care places that we're going to need, particularly as we know people are now entering residential care much later in life. They're staying home longer, which is great, but when they do enter residential care, they're older, frailer and more likely to need a high care place. So where does the capital come from? We'll start with the Minister. As
I spoke about earlier, our zero real interest loans initiative was in place, so there was access to low-cost finance for people to be building new aged care facilities or extending upon those facilities. And that's $600 million there's access to, and that creates another 5,000 places. I outlined before the first amount of that and where we're at in terms of the number of places, 111 already operational, 848 that are in the planning or construction phase. So we've seen a strong interest from the sector in terms of being able to have access to that capital. That's why we continue that and expanded upon that, because we saw the value in making sure that aged care providers were able to access this in terms of being able to build facilities now and into the future as well. And again, this is an initiative, as I say, and looking at those numbers, it has been taken up, and this initiative is one the Coalition are committed to cutting access to that, so that so we can be building those extra places.
Senator Fierravanti-Wells from the Liberal Party.
I was just going to say, I'm not sure where the Minister's getting her figures from. Before the last election, they promised $300 million zero-interest loans to provide 2,500 additional beds. As at the 5th of May, according to information provided to me, I think Senator Seaworth was there at estimates as well, only 27 out of the promised 40 loans had been offered under the first round. As I go around the sector, people are saying to me zero-interest loans aren't working. In fact, people are just sending them back. It's because the viability of the sector sector is, what's the point of taking out a loan if I can't repay it? I mean, that's what providers have said to me, and so we think that that money can be better utilised in the way that we would like to propose, which is the 30,000 by 3,000 beds as a straight out grant. In relation to capital, given the wide terms of reference of the Productivity Commission and given the fact that we will be immediately starting work in relation to negotiations with the sector in relation to the agreement, we envisage that it is likely that the Productivity Commission will make some pronouncements given its wide terms of reference, and from our perspective we know that those will form part of discussions as part of the agreement. And as Rachel said, we don't really know what the Productivity Commission is going to come out with, but I'm sure that capital issues will be on the table as part of those pronouncements and those recommendations, and as I said previously, those will be fed through as part of the work of the as part of the work of the agreement.
Greens, Rachel
Bonds,
Siewert.
you're right, bonds have been a very contentious issue. Wherever you go, you hear people talking about bonds. But we do need to invest more capital into building more beds, and we believe that's a responsibility of the community in terms of our government also investing. But I think in the longer term there will be a separation between accommodation and the cost of care and the provision of care. That's into the long term in terms of part of the reform. And I think as a community we need to have a fairly strong debate about how we invest in aged care, which is why we want to promote this reform into the long term.
So what you're suggesting there is splitting the idea of accommodation versus the care provided. I mean, we all pay for accommodation throughout our lives as renters, as mortgage holders, as homeowners. Suddenly you go into an aged care, a high care aged care facility, you no longer pay for your accommodation.
And that's part of the discussion we need to have in terms of reforming the aged care sector. But having said that, we need to be extremely clear that we as a community guarantee care for our ageing population. So that has to be the bottom line in terms of social justice. We absolutely have to guarantee care for the community. But I think into the future there will be consumer-driven choice. There will be a separation between accommodation and care. But that is a debate that we very clearly need to have with the whole of the community to ensure that we are providing high-quality care and everybody is guaranteed quality care.
As you can imagine, I've got lots more questions, but I think everyone wants to have some morning tea. So I would like to thank Justine Elliott, Senator Fierravanti-Wells and Senator Rachel Siewert.